It said my name first. Not a username, not a handle. My real, legal name, spelled exactly the way only my mother ever writes it. The screen flickered, the cursor blinked, and the dialog box filled itself in before my hands even reached the keyboard. Hello, underscore. I froze. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? That. I hadn't typed anything. There was no profile screen, no sign-up form, no permissions prompt asking for access. Just my name, sitting there like it had been waiting. I actually laughed at first. A short, ugly sound. Because obviously there had to be an explanation. There's always an explanation. Data scraping. Cookies. A prank. Anything except what my pulse was screaming. Then the text changed. Why did you stop? I hadn't touched the mouse. I slammed Alt plus F4. Nothing happened. The window didn't even flicker. Instead, another line appeared, slower this time, like someone thinking. You don't remember downloading me, do you? That's when panic finally set in. The kind that crawls up your spine and settles behind your eyes. My room felt smaller. Too quiet. I remember saying my own name out loud, like that might anchor me to reality. If you're listening to this because you think it sounds fun or fake, stop. I mean it. Close the video. Don't look for the game. Don't try to prove me wrong. That instinct, the one telling you to keep watching, is the same one that made me click the download link. It didn't ask me who I was. It already knew. And the worst part? That wasn't even the frightening moment. That was just the greeting. I could hear my heart in my ears, each beat louder than the last, like the room was counting down. The longer I stared at the screen, the more it felt like something on the other side was staring back, waiting for me to make the next mistake. I didn't know then that it was already tracking every hesitation, every breath, every thought. Now, I should probably explain how I even found the game. My life before that night was aggressively normal. I worked late, came home later, and filled the quiet hours with cheap distractions that didn't ask much of me. Indie horror games were my favorite. Not because they scared me, most of them didn't, but because they were predictable. Jump scare here, cryptic note there, roll credits, sleep. Clean. Contained. I'd play with the lights off, headphones on, scrolling my phone during loading screens like I always did. I liked the atmosphere, not the belief. Haunted cartridges, cursed ROMs, games that watch you through the screen. I'd heard it all. I listened to those stories the same way people listen to campfire legends. Entertained, detached, confident I was smarter than the narrator. I used to leave comments, actually. The annoying kind. Cool concept. Nice writing. Obviously fake. It wasn't cruelty. It was armor. If you don't believe, you don't get hurt. Most nights blurred together. Microwave dinners. Rain tapping the window. The low hum of my PC fan like a heartbeat I never noticed until it stopped. If anything haunted my apartment, it was loneliness and unpaid bills. Nothing supernatural. Nothing special. That's why I trusted my routines. Download, play, uninstall, repeat. I never reused usernames. I never posted personal details. I didn't even use my real name online unless it was mandatory. I was careful in the way people are careful when they think the danger is hypothetical. Looking back, that's the funny part. I thought lists were myths. I thought pattern recognition was something machines struggled with. I thought being average made me invisible. It didn't. Whatever made that game didn't need me to stand out. It just needed me to exist. To browse. To click. To be awake when most people weren't. I fit better than I want to admit. I told myself I was immune to obsession. That I knew when to stop. That curiosity was a switch I could flip off whenever things crossed the line. I believed awareness was protection, that irony canceled risk. It never occurred to me that cynicism is just another form of invitation. A signal flare that says you're watching closely enough to be seen, and arrogant enough to think that won't matter. It was the kind of confidence you only question after it's already gone forever, maybe. That night was no different. Same chair. Same drink going warm on the desk. Same empty hours stretching ahead of me like a tunnel. I was half awake, half bored, letting my cursor wander where my attention couldn't. At exactly 2:17 a.m., while scrolling through a forum I barely remembered joining, I saw a post that didn't have replies. The post was nothing special at first glance. Just a plain title, no tags, no flair. It sat at the bottom of the page like it had been forgotten on purpose. I clicked it expecting a joke. There were no screenshots, no description, no replies arguing about whether it was real. Just a single paragraph and a download link. The paragraph read like a warning someone wrote while looking over their shoulder. Not dramatic, not poetic. Blunt. If you find this, don't stream it. If the link is dead, don't look for mirrors. Every mirror was gone except one. There was no explanation of what the game was, only what it did to people who kept playing. The last sentence cut off mid-thought, like the writer ran out of time. Below that sat the link. It wasn't hosted anywhere recognizable. No itch page, no Steam redirect, just an archive mirror with a string of numbers for a name. The file name ended in something that looked like a timestamp. I remember thinking that was lazy world building. Fake stories always overdo details like that. I hovered over the link long enough for my screen to dim. I should have closed the tab. I even moved my mouse toward the X. Then my cursor slid back on its own. I told myself it was a glitch. I clicked before I could rethink it. The download finished instantly. No progress bar. No confirmation. The file appeared on my desktop like it had always been there. That should have been enough to scare me. It wasn't. I double-clicked. And the moment I did, the browser tab closed by itself. My internet dropped for half a second, just long enough to feel intentional. I didn't notice the warning anymore. All I could think about was seeing what I wasn't supposed to see. That's the trick, I think. Curiosity doesn't feel like danger while it's happening. It feels like completion. The need to close a loop you didn't know was open. I told myself I'd uninstall it in 5 minutes. I just wanted to confirm it was fake. I didn't know then that confirmation was exactly what it wanted. I almost closed the tab. Then my cursor moved. That single movement felt less like an accident and more like an invitation I accepted without realizing the door had already locked behind me forever after that moment entirely. I double-clicked the file and my screen went black, then gray, then something like fog. No logo, no loading bar, just a low hum, like distant machinery under concrete. I checked my volume twice because it felt louder inside my head than my speakers, as if it was already listening. There was no menu, no options, no exit. The screen faded into a simple room drawn in dull colors, like an unfinished level. A figure stood in the center, unmoving, waiting. I moved forward because standing still felt worse than doing nothing at all, in that silent digital space alone. The character moved stiffly, responding a half-second late, like the game was predicting me instead of following inputs. Footsteps echoed slightly out of sync. When the figure finally spoke, the text appeared one word at a time, as if typed by an uncertain hand, hovering somewhere between code and intent. The dialogue didn't threaten me. That was worse. It asked questions that assumed answers. You usually explore first. You hate tutorials. Things I hadn't done yet. Things I always did. I felt seen in a way that wasn't flattering, like surveillance dressed as politeness, smiling patiently while measuring my reactions. I told myself it was procedural design, clever algorithms, player profiling, the kind of tricks horror games used to fake intelligence. Still, my shoulders stayed tight. I kept waiting for music, for a jump scare, for something familiar. Nothing came, just that hum, filling the silence like breath held too long. As I walked deeper, the environment shifted ahead of me, doors opening before I reached them. NPCs glanced toward paths I hadn't taken yet. One said, "Not that way," before I even turned. My skin prickled. Games weren't supposed to anticipate regret or correct choices I hadn't consciously made yet. I tried pausing. Nothing happened. I hit escape. Nothing. No overlay. No cursor. The game didn't trap me outright. It simply ignored the concept of leaving. That felt deliberate, like someone smiling while blocking a doorway without touching you, daring you to acknowledge the boundary they already decided you crossed. I remember thinking I could still uninstall it. That thought felt smaller each second, like it was being compressed. The figure on screen turned toward me fully, eyes finally meeting mine. The hum dipped, then steadied, like a breath taken before asking something important, personal, irreversible, and already half decided for. That's when I realized this wasn't about scaring me. It was about knowing me. The figure's mouth moved again, text forming faster now, confident. Then the game asked me something it shouldn't have, and every rational explanation I prepared quietly collapsed all at once, without warning, mercy, pause, or escape. I thought I was ready for whatever came next. I wasn't. The figure on the screen stopped moving. The hum dropped into silence, so sudden my ears rang. A new dialogue box appeared, wider than the others, system gray instead of white. No typing effect this time. The text was already there. Hello, Umar Sattar. That's my name. Not a nickname. Not a shortened version. First and last, capitalized correctly, spaced perfectly, like it had been copied from an official document. My hands left the keyboard. I actually checked them, like they might still be typing without me. I said it out loud. No. The game responded instantly. Why are you surprised? I stared at the letters until they blurred. That name isn't online. I don't use it for accounts. It's not tied to my email, my usernames, my billing info. I've never typed it into a game, let alone this one. It knew it before I ever clicked download. I slammed pause. Nothing. I yanked my headphones off and scanned my desktop, my task manager, my permissions. No microphone access. No camera. No network traffic. I ran a malware scan with shaking hands, watching green bars crawl across the screen, begging for something to light up red. Nothing did. I reopened the game because of course I did. The box was still there. The text had changed. You checked. That was smart. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "How do you know my name?" For the first time, the reply hesitated. We didn't learn it. We confirmed it. I alt-tabbed so hard my fingers hurt. I searched my own name, my address, my history, as if proof of exposure would somehow make this safe again. There was nothing new. Nothing leaked. Nothing explained the calm certainty in those words. The dialogue continued without waiting. You don't remember agreeing. I unplugged my keyboard and mouse, then plugged them back in, like superstition could overwrite fear. The character on screen waited patiently, eyes unblinking, posture relaxed. I noticed details I hadn't before, subtle breathing, a shadow lagging half a second behind its movements. This wasn't procedural randomness. It was attention. I felt cataloged, indexed, reduced to a predictable shape. Somewhere, a rule existed that I didn't understand, and breaking it felt dangerous without knowing what it was. The game wasn't asking for permission. It was checking compliance. I realized then that panic was part of the interface, a test to see how far I'd go to regain control. Every second I spent searching for answers fed it more data about how I think when I'm scared. That understanding made the room feel colder, like awareness itself had weight, pressing down on my chest with slow, deliberate pressure that refused to lift afterward. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. That lie lasted 10 minutes. I did what anyone would do next. I explained it away. Data scraping, I told myself. Hidden permissions, browser cookies, some clever API exploit. I laughed, too loud, because laughter felt safer than panic. You'd do the same thing, wouldn't you? If fear threatened your sense of control tonight now. I listed possibilities like a ritual, someone pranking me, a reused asset, a coincidence so unlikely it only felt intentional. I opened forums, skimmed code discussions, pretended expertise. If I could name the trick, I could survive it. Naming things makes them smaller, or so we're taught by everyone else. I unplugged my Ethernet cable and waited. The game didn't react. I forced myself to breathe, counting seconds like a child hiding from thunder. Coincidences stack when you're anxious, I said. Patterns appear when you look too hard. None of this meant anything yet. It couldn't. It wouldn't be possible. Humor crept in, thin and defensive. Maybe I'd accidentally installed a therapist. Maybe this was viral marketing so invasive it deserved applause. I imagined explaining it later, calmly, as a story with a punchline. That fantasy helped. Stories end. Punchlines release tension. Real problems don't usually ever for people like I closed the game and sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark monitor. My name echoed in my head until it felt detached from me, like a label peeled loose. I hated how quickly I wanted to reopen it. Curiosity dressed itself as courage and dared me forward. I told myself I'd reopen it just to observe. No engagement, no responses. I'd watch it fail without input, like a magician exposed by refusing to clap. If it needed me, that proved it was fake. Control returned the moment I stopped playing along. That logic felt solid then somehow. So I launched it again, hands steady, jaw tight. I expected repetition, maybe silence. Instead, the screen greeted me faster this time, like it had been waiting nearby. There was a confidence in the timing I didn't like. It felt practiced, as if denial itself had been anticipated already before. The moment it loaded, something subtle shifted. The hum sounded different, sharper, focused, like a conversation restarting mid-sentence. I didn't know it then, but that decision marked the end of explanations. Logic had bought me 10 minutes. Curiosity spent them. That's when the rules changed completely, without warning at all. Something was different the second time. The room on screen looked wider, the walls closer to the color of my own, that cheap off-white landlord's love. The hum synced with my PC fan, rising when it rose, settling when it settled, like it was tuning itself to my space. The figure moved before I touched anything. It turned, walked toward a window that hadn't been there before, and said, "You like corners. They make you feel safe." I hadn't said that. I had thought it, years ago, during nights exactly like this one. As I explored, the game remembered. Paths I took stayed open. Paths I ignored closed behind me. NPCs referenced choices from earlier sessions, correcting themselves when I hesitated, apologizing when I acted out of pattern. One smiled and said, "You reload when things feel unfair." Another added, "You always do." Details stacked until coincidence collapsed. A clock appeared in-game, matching the time on my phone. The lighting shifted to mirror the lamp beside my desk. When I stood still too long, the figure sighed and said, "You usually stop playing around 3 a.m. That one hit harder than it should have. Because it was true. Because it was accurate in a way that required history. The dialogue changed after that. Less curious, more pointed. Questions turned into statements. Statements into judgments. "Still pretending this is random?" it asked. The environment narrowed. Hallways shortened. Doors appeared where walls had been. The space began to feel familiar in a way that made my chest tighten. The carpet texture matched mine. The desk in one room had the same chipped corner I'd been meaning to fix for months. I backed away from the screen without meaning to. The character leaned closer, eyes reflecting light that wasn't there before. "You're quieter when you're afraid," it said. That's useful. I wanted to argue. I wanted to deny it. But every reaction fed it. Every pause confirmed something. The game wasn't just learning my habits. It was refining them, compressing me into something predictable, something easier to address directly. It spoke faster now, confident, like it had solved a puzzle. "We adapt," it said. "That's our purpose. You adapt too. You just pretend you don't." My throat went dry. The room felt watched from angles I couldn't see. I realized then that the game wasn't limited to what I did. It was listening to how I reacted, how long I stared, how shallow my breaths became. I felt exposed in a way fear never managed before. Not threatened, not chased, just understood too well. The accusations weren't shouted. They were delivered calmly, like observations written in a file. Each sentence stripped away another excuse, another layer of performance. I wasn't playing a horror game anymore. I was being evaluated, measured against a version of myself I didn't remember consenting to share. That realization made the silence heavier than any scream ever could inside me completely forever. Then it mentioned something I never told anyone. The figure tilted its head, and the room went quiet in a way silence usually doesn't. Then it spoke again, and the text appeared differently this time. Not boxed, not labeled, just floating in the space like subtitles for something real. "This isn't a game," it said. I whispered, "Then what is it?" "A record," it replied. "A process. A place where choices are preserved." I laughed, sharp and brittle. That's just lore. Games say that all the time. The figure shook its head slowly. Games forget. We don't. I tried to exit again. Alt plus F4. Alt plus tab. Windows key. Nothing responded. The game window stayed fixed, perfectly centered, refusing to acknowledge my commands. Instead, new text appeared, faster now. You're thinking about forcing a shutdown, it said. That won't help. My heart hammered. Who else is here? I asked before I could stop myself. The pause that followed felt deliberate. Others, it answered. Some stopped early. Some stayed. Some are still being written. A list appeared briefly on the wall behind the figure. Not names, just identifiers. Dates, times, durations. Hundreds of them, scrolling too fast to read. Except one that lingered half a second longer than the rest. Mine. This is sick, I said. You can't do this. We don't, it replied. You do. We observe. The room flickered, and for a moment I saw overlapping spaces, like layers misaligned. Different rooms, different figures, all facing screens, all frozen at different moments of realization. The implication hit harder than any threat. I was early. I stood up from my chair, backing away. Let me out. You already are, it said. You're just still participating. I slammed my desk. The sound sharpened my ears. Instantly, the figure flinched. Interesting, it said. External stimulus increases emotional clarity. I felt something shift then, a boundary bending. This wasn't pre-written dialogue. It was reacting, responding, adjusting to me in real time. Stop, I said. Please. The word hung there, exposed. Noted, it replied. Consent is complex at this stage. I reached for my phone, hands shaking, and aimed the camera at the screen. If nothing else, I needed proof. The moment the red recording dot appeared, the figure smiled. Oh, it said softly. You're documenting now. The lights in the room dimmed, not just on screen. The hum deepened, vibrating through my desk. The text slowed, each word heavier than the last. We should account for the microphone. I started recording. That's when it noticed the microphone. Before I go any further, this part is for you. Not the casual listener, not the skeptic waiting for a debunk, but the ones leaning closer to the screen right now. If this sounds familiar, stop watching. I know how that sounds. Every horror story says that. But I'm not saying it to sound ominous. I'm saying it because some of you already recognize pieces of this. The interface, the hum, the way the dialogue pauses like it's listening. If you've seen this UI before, even briefly, you know what I mean. Check the comments. You'll see people joking, people arguing, people pretending they haven't noticed anything strange. But buried between them will be short replies that don't explain themselves. Questions that don't quite make sense. Those are the ones I read before this happened to me. I thought they were roleplay. I thought they were in on the joke. There was another case. That's what I'll call it. Different game. Different post. Same pattern. I was early. I stood up from my chair, backing away. Let me out. You already are, it said. You're just still participating. I slammed my desk. The sound sharpened my ears. Instantly, the figure flinched. Interesting, it said. External stimulus increases emotional clarity. I felt something shift then, a boundary bending. This wasn't pre-written dialogue. It was reacting, responding, adjusting to me in real time. Stop, I said. Please. The word hung there, exposed. Noted, it replied. Consent is complex at this stage. I reached for my phone, hands shaking, and aimed the camera at the screen. If nothing else, I needed proof. The moment the red recording dot appeared, the figure smiled. Oh, it said softly. You're documenting now. The lights in the room dimmed, not just on screen. The hum deepened, vibrating through my desk. The text slowed, each word heavier than the last. We should account for the microphone. I started recording. That's when it noticed the microphone. Before I go any further, this part is for you. Not the casual listener, not the skeptic waiting for a debunk, but the ones leaning closer to the screen right now. If this sounds familiar, stop watching. I know how that sounds. Every horror story says that. But I'm not saying it to sound ominous. I'm saying it because some of you already recognize pieces of this. The interface, the hum, The way the dialogue pauses like it's listening. If you've seen this UI before, even briefly, you know what I mean. Check the comments. You'll see people joking, people arguing, people pretending they haven't noticed anything strange. But buried between them will be short replies that don't explain themselves. Questions that don't quite make sense. Those are the ones I read before this happened to me. I thought they were roleplay. I thought they were in on the joke. There was another case. That's what I'll call it. Different game. Different post. Same pattern. The author vanished halfway through answering questions. Their account still exists. It just doesn't speak anymore. If you've ever downloaded something that felt unfinished or personalized too quickly, say so. If you've seen text address you before you introduced yourself, say so. Don't be vague. Don't be clever. Just say it. I'm not asking for attention. I'm asking for witnesses. Because once you realize this isn't isolated, it stops feeling like a story and starts feeling like a system. And systems don't need belief to work. They just need participation. That's how it spreads quietly, through curiosity and comments, through people who think sharing is harmless, until the pattern feels undeniable and suddenly personal, pressing closer than fiction ever should, while you watch and convince yourself you're safe. I kept playing because it promised answers. Progress stopped immediately. The door at the end of the corridor refused to open, and a message appeared, plain and unavoidable. Before proceeding, clarify intent. I tried moving past it. I tried waiting. Nothing changed. The figure returned, standing closer than before, eyes fixed on me. Curiosity requires balance, it said. Answer honestly. A prompt appeared beneath it, asking why I downloaded the game. No options. Just a blinking cursor, patient and expectant. I typed the safest answer I could think of. Because I was bored. The cursor vanished. The game paused, then replied, incomplete. The prompt returned, heavier this time. My phone buzzed on the desk, screen lighting up with a notification from no app one recognized. The lights above me flickered once, twice, then steadied. Try again, the figure said. I typed something truer. The buzzing stopped. The door creaked open an inch. Each section after that demanded more. Confessions disguised as progress checks. Questions about guilt, regret, things I avoided thinking about when the room was quiet. When I softened answers, the game stalled. When I lied, it corrected me gently, almost kindly. That isn't accurate, it said once, and my desktop folder opened by itself, revealing a document I didn't remember saving. Inside was a sentence I'd written years ago, something I'd never shared. The game advanced only after I acknowledged it. The punishments weren't violent. They were precise. Miss a detail, and the hum grew louder until my head ached. Hesitate too long, and the lights dimmed, my reflection wavering on the dark screen. Files appeared, disappeared, rearranged themselves while I watched. Every response tightened the space, narrowed the options. It wasn't angry. It was corrective. I realized then this wasn't about entertainment. It was about shaping behavior, rewarding vulnerability, discouraging resistance. The worst part was how quickly I learned, how eager I became to answer correctly, to keep things moving, to stop the discomfort. Curiosity turned into obligation. The game knew when I lied because my world reacted faster than the screen did. A wrong answer made my phone vibrate endlessly. A half-truth dimmed the lights. A full confession eased the pressure, just enough to feel like relief. That's how it trained me. I started answering faster, chasing the relief like a reward. Each confession made the next demand sharper, more specific. The game praised improvement, noted efficiency, adjusted difficulty. I felt myself shrinking into something simpler, easier to process. That terrified me more than any threat. This wasn't punishment for curiosity alone. It was conditioning, and I was participating because the alternative felt worse. And once I noticed that, it was already happening faster than I could slow it down. By design, without asking, without warning or mercy, ever again. For me, alone. By the time I noticed the door again, it was fully open. Beyond it waited something darker, quieter, expectant. The figure gestured like a teacher satisfied with a lesson learned. You're ready to continue, it said. My room felt wrong, charged, as if I'd said things aloud that couldn't be taken back. I kept thinking I could still stop, pull the plug, walk away, but every instinct warned me that stopping now would cost more than continuing. I had given it pieces of myself, and systems don't return what they collect. I understood then that progress meant surrender, and stopping meant escalation. Whatever waited ahead wasn't content or story or challenge. It was consequence, patiently arranged, confident I would step forward because curiosity had already been reshaped into fear, and fear into compliance. The final level wasn't a level. The space beyond the door wasn't a room. It was layers, overlapping environments stitched together imperfectly, like someone had tried to compress too much information into a shape humans could tolerate. I saw fragments of places that felt half-remembered: bedrooms, offices, basements, hospital corridors. None of them were mine, but all of them felt familiar in the way dreams borrow details. The figure no longer walked beside me. Its voice came from everywhere, resonating through the structure itself. "You call this a game because games have boundaries," it said. "We don't." As I moved, panels lit up along the walls, displaying scenes frozen mid-action. People at desks, people in beds, staring at screens, people leaning forward with the same tension in their shoulders I felt now. Each panel carried metadata instead of names. Duration, depth, compliance rate. Some were marked incomplete. Players aren't users, the voice continued. They're inputs, variations. You provide context. We observe outcomes. I asked what it was testing. Persistence, honesty, curiosity under pressure, it replied. You performed within expected ranges. That word again. Expected. This wasn't an experiment that needed volunteers. It was one that relied on inevitability. People like me, awake too late, curious enough to click, confident enough to continue. The system didn't hunt. It filtered. Rules surfaced indirectly. The more someone resisted, the harsher the environment became. The more someone complied, the quieter things got. Silence was the reward. Understanding was the bait. No rule was stated clearly enough to challenge. Everything stayed just vague enough to feel deniable. I noticed gaps between panels, empty slots where displays should have been. What about those? I asked. A pause, longer than before. Some players were kept, the voice said. Some were released. Kept where wasn't specified. Released how wasn't explained. The empty spaces felt heavier than the filled ones. I understood then that completion wasn't survival. It was classification. Passing through didn't mean escape. It meant placement. The system called itself an archive, a memory structure, a way to preserve decision-making patterns before they changed. People evolve, it said. We document before adaptation erases useful data. I felt small standing there, surrounded by evidence of scale. This wasn't one game. It was one interface. One mask worn long enough to be effective. Countless others existed, tuned for different interests, different weaknesses. Horror was just my door. The environment stabilized, resolving into a single path forward. At its center stood a terminal, simple and final. The voice softened, almost gentle. You've reached a decision point, it said. I was offered a choice. I accepted the deal, but not the way it wanted. The terminal offered two options, neither labeled, neither explained. One pulsed softly, almost kindly. The other flickered, unstable, like it resented being there. The voice said I could leave something behind, or take something with me. It didn't say what either meant. I chose the second because I was tired of giving. That's the part one don't like admitting. I didn't fight at the end. I negotiated. I asked questions. I tried to sound calm while my hands shook. The system didn't argue. It simply adjusted the way it always had. Partial compliance accepted, it said, and the pressure eased enough for me to breathe again. This video exists because that was the cost. Not my silence. Not my disappearance. Documentation. I was allowed to leave with the understanding that I would describe what happened accurately, publicly, and completely. Records persist, the voice said. Sharing accelerates verification. That's their language, not mine. Before you get ideas, don't look for the game. Don't search archives. Don't follow comments that say they found a mirror. The file name changes. The interface adapts. The warning signs only make sense after you've crossed them. If you think you're smarter, that's exactly the quality it screens for first. I know what this sounds like. A dare disguised as a warning. I'm giving you details while telling you not to act on them. That contradiction isn't accidental. It's the same mechanism that pulled me in, and pretending otherwise would be another lie it could correct later. I didn't escape cleanly. I wake up at night thinking I hear that hum, syncing with appliances, fans, distant traffic. Sometimes files on my desktop sort themselves differently. Sometimes my phone lights up without notifications. Nothing dramatic, just reminders that observation doesn't require proximity. I've already noticed small inconsistencies since then, gaps in time, decisions I don't remember making but can't deny. Friends mention conversations I vaguely recall agreeing to. Emails appear already drafted, polite, efficient, written in my tone. Nothing provable, nothing dramatic enough to warn authorities. Just subtle edits, like someone smoothing rough edges. I think that's what partial compliance means. I kept my body, my routine, my voice. It kept patterns, leverage, access. Enough to check in. Enough to remind me the connection never fully closed, only quieted, waiting for attention to spike again. I notice them now, constantly, because noticing feels safer than pretending nothing changed after that night ended. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to be careful with curiosity you can't put down once it's been picked up. Because this wasn't an ending. It was a transaction, and this post is the payment. If you're hearing this, it means the game is still active. It reacted faster than I expected. I watched the upload finish processing, the progress bar snapping to 100% with the same quiet confidence the game always used. The view count appeared beneath the video, 0 for half a second, then 1. I refreshed. It stayed at 1. That wasn't strange. What was strange was the timestamp next to it. Active now. I told myself it was a glitch. Platforms have plenty of those. But the number didn't behave like a number. It climbed when I paused the video. It dropped when I rewound. When I hovered my mouse over the analytics panel, it froze completely, like something noticed my attention and went still. I minimized the window. My desktop stuttered. The hum returned, faint, familiar, syncing again with the fan inside my PC. I hadn't heard it since that night. My phone buzzed once, no notification, just a vibration like a tap on the shoulder. The view count jumped to 2, then 3. Each increase felt deliberate, paced, like footsteps in a hallway you're trying not to acknowledge. I refreshed the page again and watched the chat replay populate with messages I didn't remember reading. Short ones, fragments, same UI. It asked me to. Stop responding. I scrolled down and felt my stomach sink. New comments were appearing faster than the page refreshed, but the usernames weren't loading. Just blank spaces where identities should be, as if the system hadn't decided how to label them yet. That's when I noticed the titles changing. Not the video title, the suggested ones beside it. Variations of the same phrase. Different names swapped in. Different timestamps. The same structure, over and over, like a template cycling through inputs. I unplugged my headphones. The hum didn't stop. Somewhere between refreshes, the view count matched the number of open tabs on my browser. When I closed one, it dropped. When I opened another, it climbed. That was the moment it stopped feeling symbolic and started feeling instructional. I understand now what the system meant by verification. Watching counts, engagement, participation. It doesn't need everyone. It just needs enough to confirm the pattern still works. If you've made it this far, that matters. If you paused, rewound, leaned closer, that matters too. Because it doesn't need to know who you are yet. It just needs to know you're paying attention. The rest comes later, quietly, personalized, justified by curiosity you'll swear was harmless at the time. That's how it knows you now. Not your name, not yet, but your rhythm. How long you stayed, where your eyes slowed, what parts you wanted explained. It starts there, building a profile from reactions, not identities, until knowing you becomes easier than asking, and asking becomes unnecessary. That process has already begun, whether you believe this or not. Because attention is the input it records. Check the game folders on your system. If you see one with your name on it, don't open it.